Symptoms, or is she having, she having any symptoms, or is she?
Yeah, she's got like strep throat and stuff like that, yeah. Okay, we're in chapter 11 of Hebrews, beginning with verse 4. By faith, and I want to stop right there. Okay. Faith, the word, is mentioned 56 times in scripture. Faithfulness, and another word is mentioned another 40 times. So maybe we ought to define what the word means. Okay, and so I went to Webster and came up with a couple of good definitions, but the best one I found, specifically firm belief based upon confidence in the authority and veracity of another, rather than upon one's knowledge, reason, or judgment. Earnest and trustful confidence, as to have faith in the testimony of a witness, to have faith in a friend. I love that, to have faith in the testimony of a witness. What are we to become? Witnesses for the Lord. That tells me that if I am a witness, then you have to trust me to be that witness. And when I say something, you have to then go, well, since Ed said it, maybe I'll believe it. And it's an interesting concept for a witness to be trustworthy. I saw something yesterday that, while hilarious, was also disturbing. The grand jury that is meeting to indict President Trump, the person that they put in charge of the grand jury is a witch, a Wiccan. And she got on, somebody interviewed her and she just went crazy. She loves being interviewed. And what she did was blow the cover off of the grand jury. I'm sure that Trump's lawyers were just smiling, going, this is great. She would make a terrible witness. Okay. We're to be witnesses for Jesus Christ. Now we're sinners saved by grace. So we have to live a life that will proclaim that witness. And so this is what Abel did. By faith, Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous, God testifying about his gifts. And through faith, though he is dead, he still speaks. Now that righteousness is interesting because we don't have it in and of ourselves. It's imputed. It's imputed. We are righteous because of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And so this was imputed to Cain long before that. Or not Cain, Abel. The difference between the sacrifice of Cain and Abel was not between animal and vegetable. It was that Abel's sacrifice was made by faith. John Calvin had a statement about this. Abel's sacrifice was preferred to his brothers for no other reason than that it was sanctified by faith. For surely the fat of brute animals did not smell so sweetly that it could by its odor pacify God. And so it was all by faith. And this whole chapter, as you know, is a testimony to the faith of those who went before us. It's likely that God testified of his pleasure with Abel's sacrifice by consuming it with fire from heaven, as happened at the dedication of the tabernacle, Leviticus 9, the temple, 2 Chronicles 7, offerings made by David, 1 Chronicles 21, and Elijah, 1 Kings 18. All of these were consumed by fire, showing God's pleasure and approval. Right off with his example of Abel, the writer reminds us that faith is not necessarily rewarded on earth. Abel was killed by his brother Cain. The Lord was pleased with the sacrifice. Cain was upset and killed him. But God himself testifies to the righteousness of the faithful. Abel's blood still speaks to us, reminding us of the value of eternity. Our reward isn't here. Good night. The glory, the unbelievable magnificence of what will happen the moment we go home, the moment we die. If I go to prepare a place for you, okay, what's he gonna do? Come back and take us to that place. So when you die, who greets you? Not an angel. It's not your long lost brother or something like that. It's the Lord himself. And the glory of that moment will last for an eternity. It's exciting. We don't get rewarded here. Okay. Matter of fact, what's coming is probably due us. I refer again to a website called persecution.com. And it's the voice of the martyrs. And you read about what's going on in the world today. And it's closing in. It's closing in. England was mentioned in the last magazine of the voice of the martyrs. Okay? Because of a woman who was arrested for praying out in silence, praying out in front of a Planned Parenthood. And we're going to see that our faith will be tested. That's why I think we should be more and more in prayer and in communion one with another. Okay. I'm going to be doing a thing sometime in April about why go to church. And one of the things I discovered, I may have mentioned this last week, the word saint does not appear in the Bible in the singular. It is only in the plural throughout all of Scripture. Saints. Okay. And when we refer to the saints, we normally refer to the church. Verse 5. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. And he was not found because God took him up. For he obtained the witness that before his being taken up, he was pleasing to God. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. I'm sure many of you have known people who got saved long after they had attended church or something like that. My first pastor in San Angelo, First Baptist Church in San Angelo, got saved 2 years after he and his wife divorced. She got saved 3 years after. I was at her salvation. I just happened to be down there, and it was a Wednesday evening Bible study, and it hit her like, I mean, unbelievable. There was a church in Louisiana, this is back in the 1990s, where the entire elder board got saved during one of the services. Unbelievable. Have you ever met somebody who's really good in theology who may not be a believer in Jesus Christ? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about that earlier. Yeah. And we can't, that's why we don't judge. Because I can't judge. Yeah, except maybe for Clark. Nothing. But we, by faith, will be rewarded for that faith. I get excited. Many Jewish and Christian traditions make Enoch the recipient of some spectacular and strange revelations. Jude recognized him as a prophet, Jude 14 and 15, but the value of other prophecies attributed to him is uncertain at the very best. We only see him briefly in Genesis. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death. The writer to the Hebrews assumed that only a man of faith could enjoy close communion with God. Obviously, anyone who has this kind of fellowship with God must have pleased God. And in pleasing God, Enoch fulfilled the purpose for which man was created. That purpose is listed in Revelation 4, verse 11. You are worthy, O Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being. We're created to do what? Glorify God. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. This is the basic faith required of any who seek God. One must believe that he is, and one must believe he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. We must believe that God is there and that he will reveal himself to seeking the heart. I've run across any number of believers, including this one, who question their salvation, you know, who wonder sometimes why I'm worried. Do you worry at all? Sometimes I do, you know, and then I have to stop and say, what? Wait a minute, you know. I once had somebody ask me about my wife. They said, have you made proper provision for her should anything happen to you? I said, maybe, I'm not sure. I don't know what the economy is going to be like or anything like that, but I know this. The same God who takes care of me will also take care of her.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. And you've heard me say this in the pulpit if you go to our church. If you've ever questioned your salvation, that to me is proof positive that you're saved. Because what pagan ever questions their salvation? They're all good enough. They're all good enough. The writer to the Hebrews didn't say that it's difficult to please God without faith. He said it's impossible. Theologian named Newell. These two elements seem most simple. But how many professing Christians act as if God were not living? How many others go seeking after him, are not expecting from him as a rewarder? Again, I've been with a number of people who have gone home shortly after I was with them or while I was with them. And watching the believers make that transition, I firmly believe that God comes booming through at that last few moments, because I've seen it. I've seen it. And I get excited about it. Somebody said, are you worried about death? No. Dying? Yes. Just like everybody else. I'm kind of like an easy transition, but we don't know. But I do know that at the end, our Lord is there. Verse 7, by faith, Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. One of the little, maybe an argument, more likely a debate that's going online now is, was Noah able to get all of the animals into the ark? And I remember being asked that, how did you get dinosaurs in? I said, because they were babies.
Or eggs.
Or an egg. Why put a full, good night, the boat would list. And it's up to God anyhow, not up to me. It's up to God. Noah was warned of something that had never happened before. His faith was shown in not merely agreeing that the flood would come, but in doing what God told him to do regarding the flood. He was moved with godly fear. And what's interesting here is real faith will always do something. The book of James repeats this theme over and over again. And it says he condemned the world. We shouldn't think that Noah was a man who preached sermons of condemnation. Instead, the mere conduct of the godly, without any preaching at all, can feel like condemnation to the world. The earthquake that just happened in Turkey and Syria, there have been 7,700 aftershocks. 7,700 aftershocks. And it's a little arc that drops out of Turkey and hits Syria and goes back up, with the major one that hit twice. 2 days ago, a 6.4 hit the same place. We see that all over the world, increasing everywhere. And to try to warn people, they look at you like, you're crazy, you're insane. But we're still called to do what? Warn people. I don't know if the end times are now or not. I tend to think we're close, but I could be wrong. Okay, but it's still, I'm reminded of that guy I saw at Times Square that had the placard on that said the end is near. Okay, well, for someone it was, because thousands of people go through Times Square, and I'll bet you a couple of them died that night. By faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Now, I love Abraham. He did step out on faith, going to the place God promised him, but his faith was less than perfect. This is seen by comparing Genesis 12, 1 through 5, and Acts 7, 2 through 4, where it is evident that Abraham first went halfway where God called him, and only eventually obeyed completely. Yet thousands of years later, God did not remember the delayed obedience, only his faith. That's reassuring as all get out.
Yeah.
That is reassuring as all get out. Yeah. By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for a city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. So he lived as a sojourner in the land, never owning any property except the property that he and his wife were buried in, the plots. He dwelt. Dwelt is a word which appears in the original Greek, and it describes a resident alien, one who lives in a certain place but doesn't have a permanent status there. Paroikos in Greek. You and I are paroikos. We're resident aliens, okay? Because our citizenship, according to Philippians 3:20, is elsewhere. It's in heaven. I'm a citizen of heaven. I love it. After I got saved in the military, I went to another location, and they said, "Are you going to be a citizen here?" I said, "No, I'm a citizen already." I said, "Where?" I said, "Oh, let me take you to Philippians 3. They didn't want to go to Philippians 3:20. Anyhow, it was fun. A resident alien or sojourner is evident. The way they talk, the way they dress, their mannerisms, their entertainment, their citizenship, and their friends all speak of their native home. If someone is the same in all these areas as the natives, they are no longer sojourners. They are permanent residents. Christians should live as if they were permanent residents, should not live as if they were permanent residents of planet Earth. All the times I've been in Russia, I was never, ever mistaken for a Russian. They always, except for one dear lady on Red Square who asked me if I was Italian. How, I don't know. Said, "You must be Italian." I said, "Excuse me?" That was funny. And we both laughed when we were done, but that was hilarious. Dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob because they had no permanent home. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived in tents instead of houses. They looked forward to a better city, the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Trying to convince my grandkids to do that. One's 18. The oldest is 26, going on 27. I'm trying to show them that their home's not here as they try to build their lives here. Now, I was guilty of that. I'm sure all of us were at one time. Okay. But a sojourner, one who does not belong, if you will, here. We belong elsewhere. We belong elsewhere. By faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, there was born even of one man, and him as good as dead at that, and many descendants, as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. Again, Sarah's faith wasn't perfect. It's like Abraham. Abraham lied a couple of times about who his wife was. Okay. I love looking at the people in the Bible. I cannot wait to meet Peter and thank him because he always spoke before he engaged his brain. Peter, you have been an inspiration to me, She first laughed in unbelief, and then she learned to laugh in faith. Faith comes down to judging that God is faithful and able to keep his promises. It was this faith that enabled Sarah to receive strength, to conceive seed, and God gave the strength, but Sarah received it by faith. Because the faith of Sarah and Abraham, thousands, even millions of descendants are born. Their faith had an impact on more lives than they ever dreamed of. I'd like to direct you to that one statement. Our faith has more impact on lives than we will ever dream of. When we go to the Bema, the quote unquote judgment seat of Christ, to receive our rewards, we're going to be amazed at the rewards we receive. At the people who have come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ because of our witness to someone else. Who witnessed to someone else? Who witnessed to? I had a translator in Russia that was given to me when I messed up a sermon. I attempted to say Jesus na Christ of Lavas, Christ died on the cross for you. What I said is Jesus Christ of Lavas. And you probably didn't hear the shift, but there were two words shifted in there, and it means Christ died in an armchair. And the congregation sat up, and I'm thinking certainly they've heard this. Well, no, they hadn't. So the pastor gave me a translator, and we go out and been working for 2 or 3 weeks, and we're in a hospital witnessing to 3 nurses. And I turned to the translator, who never became a believer. Never became a believer. The pastor wanted me to work with that person, hopefully to see that person become a believer. And she was sitting there, and I said, "You've heard me now, what, 40 times, 50 times?" I said, "Witness to him." So she did, and 2 of the nurses came to Christ at her witness, and she never became a believer. Guess who's going to get the reward from that? I look
Hopefully
forward.
it's not never.
Huh?
Hopefully it's not.
Hopefully
never.
not never. Not while I was there. Anyhow, it was amazing to watch, but expect it. You guys are going to get rewards, and you're going to go, for what? What did I do? And boom, 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 boom. That's cool. Then we get to toss our crowns at his feet. Verse 13. All these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and having welcomed them from a distance, having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. I'm reminded of Noah. There's going to be a huge flood in about 100 years. Excuse me? What's a flood? You know, about 100 years, going to wipe everything out. And he goes, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" Build an ark. You imagine taking on that task with everybody else ridiculing you? For those who say such things, make it clear that they are seeking a country of their own. And indeed, if they have been thinking of that country from which they went out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. It's so reassuring to know that we have citizenship elsewhere. My wife and I were in Matthew this morning, and Matthew 10:25 talks about after Christ had been accused of casting devils out by Beelzebub. He just simply remarks, a nation or a country or a person or a group divided against itself cannot stand. Where do we sit now in the United States? Yeah, I believe we're close, if not there already. Pete Buttigieg, the Director of Transportation, is in East Palestine, Ohio today. Okay, because somebody else was there yesterday with 14,000 bottles of water and stuff like that. And we're seeing the division, and the division is getting wider, getting wider. The promise of the Messiah was made to Abraham and Sarah, and they believed the promise. Yet they died having never received it, only seeing it in faith. Genesis 18, 1 through 33, 2 angels and God himself before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. They saw the promises afar off, willing to look at and consider the promise of God, even though the fulfillment seemed so far away. And it was centuries away. They were assured of them, carefully considering the promise, assured that the promise was valid because God made the promise. Charles Spurgeon. They embraced them, taking the promise and embracing it in faith. Abraham and Sarah probably thought many times about the son God promised them. And these many times they embraced the promise. The Greek word for embraced is salute, as when we see a friend at a distance. Abraham and Sarah always took the promise with the understanding that this world was not their home. They knew God had a better and more enduring home for them in heaven. And these examples of faith endured through difficulty and discouragement without having received the promises. When we who have received the promises have even more reason for endurance. How many times are we tempted to give up? You know, I'm watching just the growth in the number of pastors who are leaving the ministry or going through depression and the like, and just watching them go. And I'll be 77 this year thinking, yeah, maybe I need to slow down too. You know, I was talking to a couple up front, Bruce and Pete here, and Bruce mentioned the word trying, somebody trying to do something. And I remember the other day saying to my wife, I'm trying. And she said, more than you know. So, if these examples of faith endured through difficulty and discouragement without having received the promise, then we who have, all these died in faith. They didn't need to seek faith on their deathbed. They died in faith. Though they did have faith, they did also die. We do not have faith to escape death, but to die in faith as a witness to somebody else. Those people who, by God's grace, died in my presence, thought I was ministering to them, when in reality, they were ministering to me. They never went beyond faith and grew beyond simple dependence on God, and they never went below faith and lost it. They seek a homeland. They desire better. That is a heavenly country. Living by faith is easier when we remember that this world is not our home. We try so hard to make a home here. You know, Edie and I have been incredibly fortunate to have been in the military and moved so many times. We now live in our 29th home. Okay. And that's one of the reasons we're never going to move. We're going to die right there. I don't want to go up to 30, you know, but trying to make what are you laughing at? Trying to make a home in different places like that has actually been a blessing. It's been a blessing because it's not permanent. I barely remember the other places we lived in. Okay? And I certainly couldn't draw a floor plan. Good, praise God. And then since salvation, I'm looking elsewhere. Yeah. Faith is very difficult when we live as practical atheists. This describes someone who may have theoretical belief in God, but the belief doesn't matter in what they do from day to day. When we remember there is a spiritual reality, a heavenly home that is our real home, faith is much easier. There was a couple who came to Denton Bible while I was there, and they really got involved. And then they started to back away slowly. And I'm still friends with them on social media. And all you see now is the parties they go to daily. And you see the, not that parties are bad, not that even having a drink is bad, but that's all they comment on. And they're always out with their friends partying. And what happened Tuesday night, Fat Tuesday, okay, before Ash Wednesday, they had a party that put them under for a while, okay? And you go, you know, what happened? Well, practical atheism. When we remember there is a spiritual reality, a heavenly home that is our real home, faith is so much easier. The great theme of modern times is something called naturalism, the belief that only what can be found and measured in nature is real. Scientists and educators who trust in naturalism may be content to let us believe in God, just as long as we agree that God is a fairy tale. Take a look at what's happening in our schools today. Unbelievable. Someone not real. But when we believe in the reality of God and of heaven and his word, it is completely unacceptable to those who live by naturalism. There was a gentleman who was born in 1880, died in 1856. He was an American journalist, essayist, satirist, cultural critic, scholar of American English. He commented widely on the social scene, literature, music, prominent politicians. His satirical reporting of the Scopes trial in the 1920s, which he dubbed the monkey trial, gained him attention. His name is H.L. Mencken, and he said, faith is the illogical belief in the occurrence of the impossible. This would only be true if there were no God or if he doesn't matter. Since God is, and since he does matter, faith is entirely logical. People will attack you because you have faith. And we try to prove it simply. I have faith in the chair. That's why I sit in it, stuff like that. But this is much deeper. Trying to witness my family about faith, praying like crazy that they receive faith, but watching them deny it and put it aside. Just like King Agrippa. Maybe I'll listen to you another time. Praying that other time occurred, but probably didn't. We often consider the idea that we should not be ashamed of God, but we must also consider that we may make God ashamed of us when we do not regard God and heaven and eternity as real. There can be a sense in which God is ashamed to be called our God. How many times are we afraid to witness? My wife helped me. I told you that we get these young kids coming to our house for candy 2 or 3, 4 times a week. They like your stuff. Okay. And my wife last night said, let's do this. And maybe the last. And lo and behold, one of the kids asked, said, that's a nice cross. Where did you get it? I said, my lovely wife gave it to me. I said, oh. I said, do you have one? I said, no, I don't. I said, oh, well, tell your mom about this one. That we're taking the chance that maybe mom and dad won't come up and chew us out. But that's okay. That's okay. You know. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, verse 17, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. Interesting here, the verb tense for offered up indicates that as far as Abraham was concerned, the sacrifice was complete. It had already been accomplished. In his will and his purpose, he really did sacrifice his son. The fact that he brought him to Mount Moriah proved that the sacrifice was already complete. Though Abraham had another son, Ishmael, the son of his fleshly attempt to fulfill God's promise, God did not recognize the other son. So Isaac could be called his only begotten. And the ancient Greek word translated accounting means just what it sounds like in English. It is a term from an arithmetic expression, meaning a decisive and carefully reasoned act. A decisive and carefully reasoned act. Something that you have done in your mind that you're about to accomplish. This means that Abraham calculated God's promise worthy of confidence. And as far as Abraham was concerned, Isaac was as good as dead. And it was from the dead that he received him back in a manner that prefigured the resurrection of Jesus. F. Bruce, theologian, wonders if this is not the incident that Christ referred to in John 8, verse 56, when Christ said, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. When Abraham was confronted with a promise and command from God, which seemed to contradict each other, he did what we all should do. He obeyed and let God take care of the promise. God was more than able, obviously, to do this. I went and found some Messianic rabbis and their commentary on Hebrews. And their commentary here, Abraham offered up Yitzhak as a sacrifice. The story of the Akedah Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac, Genesis 22, is read in the synagogue as part of the liturgy for the second day of Rosh Hashanah, the new year, Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets. And its Sabbath service contains this prayer. And this is the prayer. Remember unto us Adonai our God, the covenant, the loving kindness, and the oath, which you swore to Abraham, our father, on Mount Moriah, making the binding, Akedah, with which Abraham, our father, bound his son Yitzhak on the altar, appear before you, how he overcame his compassion in order to do your will with a perfect heart. That's the prayer where they acknowledge God's hand in that binding of Isaac. It's highly appropriate that the Akedah should be remembered in this season when Jewish people are concerned with sin and punishment and death. How do we know they're concerned with that? Well, 10 days later is Yom Kippur, the High Holy Day, where if you go to sleep during that 24-hour period, you are no longer a member of the Jewish nation. You're excommunicated. As symbolized by sacrifice. There's a rabbi named Rashi. He comments on Genesis 22. The Lord will see this binding to forgive Israel every year and rescue them from trouble, so that it will be said on this day, one and all the coming generations, on the mountain of the Lord, it is seen that the ashes of Yitzhak heaped up and serving for atonement. What he's saying is that the sacrifice actually occurred, not that Isaac was killed, but that because of Abraham's faith, it was as good as done. Verse 18. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendant shall be called. He considered that God is able to raise people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type, as a parable. In this verse, the author focuses not on the ethical problem of human sacrifice, but on the strong faith of Abraham. Why did I bring that up? Because one of the criticisms of our Bible is that Abraham was going to perform a human sacrifice. And human sacrifice, obviously, is a monumental sin. This faith is evidenced in Abraham's confidence that both he and his son would come back from Mount Moriah. Genesis 22, verse 5. I and the boy will go there, worship, and return to you. God could even raise people from the dead. The Jewish doctrine of resurrection was not borrowed, as some say, from Persian Zoroastrianism, but is taught in the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible. And he was raised. The Pharisees held to this doctrine, and the group of Sadducees did not. The second blessing of the binding, central prayer in Jewish liturgy, recited 3 times a day by Orthodox Jews, focuses on the central article of Orthodox Jewish faith, the resurrection, physical resurrection. So when we get to witness to a Jew, we can talk about their own Bible and show them that they not only believe in the resurrection, but when they celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the Feast of Trumpets, the prayer acknowledges the resurrection and talks about the binding of Isaac and him coming back. You, Lord, are powerful forever. You revive the dead. This is their prayer. You are strong to save. You sustain the living with loving kindness. Revive the dead with great compassion. Support the falling. Heal the sick. Loose the bound. And keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. Who is like you, O doer of mighty deeds? Who is a king like you, who puts to death, restores life, causes salvation to spring forth. You can be counted on to revive the dead. Blessed are you, reviver of the dead. Simple Jewish is the fact that our God is a God of the living. And he revives those to life. That's enough of that. Jacob had to lean, oh yeah. Where'd I go? Oh, there. Verse 8 through 19 of the Tanakh itself extols Abraham's faith. I'm not going to go into that. Verse 20, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding things to come. The events referred to in the blessings of Genesis 27 were yet to come, long after, when King Herod, an Idumean, that is an Edomite, a descendant of Esau, would break Jacob's yoke on Esau and rule Jacob's descendants. Isaac was really in the flesh, not in faith, when he first intended to bless Esau instead of Jacob. Do you remember that he was blind, couldn't see anymore? So we see Jacob coming in wearing animal skins, stuff like that. And he wanted to bless Esau with the birthright for carnal reasons. He liked Esau as more manly man, and he liked the wild game he brought home. Instead, he should have chosen Jacob, whom God chose. My wife and I were reading this the other day. So 3 nights ago, we had bacon wrapped dove for dinner. And then 2 nights ago, we had venison sausage. She said, you're a manly man. I said, right. Yet I think, real quick story, that last deer that we got, I never saw it. My wife said, there's a deer. Of course, my wife, when she points south, she'll do this. She went, there's a deer. And I looked over there. I said, there's no deer over there. She goes, no, here. I said, oh, over there. So I shot the deer. She helped me clean it, threw it in the truck with me. It's her deer. Isaac came to the place of faith when he discovered that he had actually blessed Jacob instead of Esau. It says he trembled exceedingly. Genesis 27, verse 33. When Isaac trembled exceedingly, he was troubled because he knew that he had tried to box God in, to defeat God's plan, and that God beat him at his own game. He realized that he would always be defeated when he tried to resist God's will, even when he didn't like it. What a witness to us. How many times do we attempt to resist God's will? Will we ever be successful? No, no. And he came to learn that despite his arrogant attempts against the will of God, God's will was still glorious. In faith, or the faith and Isaac's blessing came after Isaac's attempt to thwart the will of God was destroyed. When he said of Jacob, and indeed he shall be blessed, Genesis 27, verse 33, Isaac knew that his weak attempt to tell God what to do was defeated, and he responded in faith. He didn't say this, but he might as well. Okay, God, you win. Let Jacob be blessed with the birthright, and let Esau be blessed after him in his own way. And I'm going to stop there because no, I'm not. I got one more one. Good. By faith, verse 21, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. Jacob, by all accounts, led a rather carnal life, yet his faith could also look beyond death, and he blessed each of his sons. When he was dying, he blessed Joseph's sons, leaning on a walking stick. Some translations said leaning on the head of a bed, but it was actually a mittah, which is a walking stick. Jacob had to lean on the top of his staff because he was given a limp many years before. How? Anybody remember? Yeah, wrestling with. Yeah, the pre-incarnate Christ.
It says this when I saw he blessed his sons, I wouldn't want some of those blessings. They call them blessings. But some of them were really coming down hard on those sons.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I don't, maybe I don't understand the word blessing.
They're referred to as blessings, but what's happening here is these are prophecies.
Yeah,
He's not giving them something except an awareness of what their future looks like.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we have a number of prophecies that are available to us.
Yeah.
We ought to be paying attention to them.
Yeah.
Much as these sons,
Pardon me?
much as these sons have received. We could call them blessings, but the 3.5 years of tribulation.
Yeah, that's, and prayerfully,
in our sense.
we won't see him. We'll be up there saying, how long, O Lord? And as he leaned on his staff, he remembered that God was great and held his future and the future of his descendants. Therefore, he worshiped, demonstrating his faith and dependence upon God. This chapter is monumental in its description of people who were not, by any stretch of the imagination, perfect. Okay? It's encouraging because you can look at your own life and go, if these guys were forgiven, maybe I've got a shot. You know, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, you're looking at their lives and you're like, Esau, good night. You know, these guys did not live the best of lives, just like us. Okay? If we looked into our own past, which I don't like to do. Okay? I like it when somebody witnesses and tells me 10% of their witness was that they led a sinful life, and then 90% is what God has done for them. But what you normally get is 90% of, let me tell you about all my sins. You know, I was pretty good at it. And then 10% of what God did. But this faith of Joseph when he was dying, he mentions the Exodus. Just incredible. Okay? These people of faith, wonderful testimony for us. Well, that's enough for this week. We'll pick it up next week with chapter 11, verse 22. We're about to come to the end of Hebrews. If you have a desire to study something other than Hebrews after this, go ahead and let Doug know, and Doug will make the decision for me. Is that okay?
way to go, Doug.
He's been blessed.
And I will be blessed. Seriously, I just so you know, Doug is our head elder, and I have a lot of confidence in the man's decision. He's helped me quite a bit. So would you close us, Doug, in prayer, please?
Holy Father, we do thank you for your word, and thank you, Father, for the spirit that teaches us. And Father, just pray that we might walk in your truth in your life. We might share Jesus with others. In Christ's holy name we pray.